Think your essay is good enough? Let's find out. Each week until the deadline, I'll be breaking down subscribers' essays, your essays, showing you what works, what doesn't, and how to stand out. Today, we have two essays that couldn't be more different. One about memory, the other about velociraptors. Trust me, you're gonna wanna take notes. Instead of receiving a cute purring kitten or a gentle fuzzy puppy, 8 ferocious velociraptors invite themselves to wreak havoc in my backyard. Love this hook. 6 a.m. sharp, I am jolted awake to the sound of their feral screams, a sign of their hunger and thirst for their cuisine of choice. Chicken kibble, eggshells, and fresh iced water. Yes, it has to be crunchy ice. All right, so far I'm loving these specifics, and honestly, I don't have much feedback. As I slide open the back door, meeting the icy sharp blast of the winter Connecticut winds, I transform into a restaurant waitress as my arms attempt to juggle their ever so mouth-watering meal. Each step I take audibly cracks open the icy crust of the snow, my face scrunching at the contact of the flying icy shards. Despite my attempts to rush over in a timely fashion, maneuvering in my dad's 2 big rubber boots, I leave the beasts impatient, apparent as they eventually always come charging in my direction, thirsting ravenously for the breakfast degustation. First lesson, there's some pros and cons when it comes to this type of hook. I love the specificity, things like chicken kibble, eggshells, fresh ice water, and especially when you're able to say something like, yes, it has to be crunchy ice, that adds a lot of voice and authenticity to the narrative. I mentioned this in the previous video, but specificity equals authenticity. That said, there is a bit of a dark side when it comes to this really common advice, right? Like show, don't tell. What we do want to show is solution. And yes, technically we would call this solution since the student is quite active. They are feeding chickens, but this isn't the most impressive demands admission to Harvard or Yale yet. I would actually just kind of like merge these two together. Like 6 a.m., I am jolted awake to the sound of 8 ferocious velociraptors screaming for kibble and fresh iced water. Yes, it has to be crunchy ice. Okay, cool. So then we can kind of merge these together. Now, when you see yourself repeating literally the same word, then that is a sign, my friends, that you should be merging and condensing. All right, so here are some of my suggestions to condense this paragraph. I really want to save the showing and a lot of those sensory details for a very impressive standout solution. At the end of the day, anyone can feed chickens, so we want to pinpoint and talk about something that really no one else can. All right, moving on. In fact, their cuisine is of such high quality that I had to call my siblings in horror to back me up in this battle. We gathered, appearing as something reminiscent of the villagers from Shrek. Now that I really like. Awesome metaphor simile, pitchforks and rakes at hand. I, the eldest and therefore the general, took the lead, inching cautiously with my heart pounding out of my chest toward the 2 furry intruders, 2 big obese raccoons inside the coop. Normally I'm not a big fan of talking about problems, but this is a really funny situation, so it's worthwhile talking a little bit more about the raccoons. They ravenously and quite disgustingly, may I add, licked their lips clean from the bowls of my precious raptors, shamelessly indulging in what, to them, must have felt like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Little did they know, a militia of villagers were approaching them, ready to take them to their demise. With the tightening of my grip on my pitchfork, I lunged at the 2 trespassers. The voice is absolutely shining through. In a sense, this is a story only this student could have written because of the way it's written. Many students can write about feeding chickens, but it comes out very boring. And this is absolutely not boring because of the particular word choice, because of the flow, because of the verbiage. So this is proof that you can turn any mundane topic into something really exciting. I was a little bit afraid that this would just be a story about feeding chickens and nothing more, but the introduction of the raccoons really presents a hilarious problem, and you can picture perfectly how this character is kind of approaching the imposters, the trespassers, with their pitchfork weapon armed in hand. They let out a yelp, darting and launching themselves into a hole at the edge of the coop's fence and into the woody abyss. Aha, that's how they got in here. Our chickens, huddled in the corner of the coop this whole time, looked at us eagerly, expecting another meal like usual. Sorry guys, we have some work to do. Defeated, they dispersed and went back to the coop, doing the chickenly things they normally do. We lowered our weapons and got to work. Okay, so I do like the exchange, the humor here as well, but I'm not entirely convinced we honestly need this. I would probably remove the kind of like chicken-human interaction. It's not exactly, again, demanding admission, so I want to know specifically how they patched the hole. I want to see kind of like a creative, long-term, sustainable solution in addition to the voice, the humor. Inspecting the hole, it looked as if it had been chewed through. Likely, these intruders were planning their raid for a while. D, go get those zip ties from Dad's desk. As my younger brother D ran back to the house, the rest of my siblings and I began to scour around for big rocks to barricade the coop and make a fort. The work was dirty. Under each rock, there scurried out dozens of angry ants and surprised earthworms, with particles of the soil seeping into our fingernails. D came back with the plastic bag of our ties. Alright guys, we should tie up the holes and then block the outer perimeter with these rocks. That should keep those intruders out. So we started together. There's something a little bit off about this section. Whereas before there was just so much voice and description, that's kind of what should be in this section. Now we get like very blunt dialogue and telling. It feels like a little bit of a letdown after that super colorful, interesting opening. And really, what's going to get student F into their dream school isn't like necessarily how they chased out the raccoons or how they built the barricade. What I really want to see, and this is so critically important, please pay attention guys, is how this student organizes and coordinates her younger siblings to build a long-term solution. In other words, how does he or she, they drive collaboration to make sure the raccoons never enter again? That way, the story isn't just about feeding chickens and the fact that you have to get up at 6 a.m. and it's cold and you're feeding them eggshells, ironically, but really more about how you lead. That's what's gonna get you in. So we started together. We turned into a team of the dwarves from Snow White, each of us responsible for a different task at hand. Daniil tied the holes of the fence up with the clicking of the zip ties. My brother Anton scoured for big heavy rocks in the woods, bringing them back near us in a pile. My youngest sister Anya was dopey. She gave it her best despite her small size and swung with the weight of the rocks as both of us went back and forth to this pile, taking the rocks and carrying them over where we carefully placed them on the outer perimeter of our castle, aka the coop. This section needs a massive makeover. Right now it's just pure telling, and honestly, the main character has taken a back seat and is just saying, this person did this person did that, my third sibling did this. Unfortunately, that's not quite working and it feels like a little bit of a letdown. What I was really looking for and hoping for was concrete proof of how this character leads their younger siblings. Saying something like, I knew Daniil was more handy and he didn't need a lot of hands-on attention. He was more mechanical. Great, I gave him the zip ties and I left him to do his own thing. Anton, on the other hand, I knew that he really liked getting his hands dirty, but he often gets injured. So I gave him some gloves and then I went out and found rocks that would be a good fit. And then finally, there was Anya. She's the youngest and honestly, she can't do much, but it's really important for her to feel like she's doing something part of the family. So I gave her a very simple job. Just make sure that you take out all the earthworms and the fire ants, brush them off and then give them to the chickens. They'll enjoy the worms more than us. Do you guys see how those small changes make such a big difference? Because now we can see the type of leader that this student is, as opposed to just being like a report. This person did this, that person did that, third sibling did this, and so on and so forth. Honestly, that kind of just paints this character as really passive and they're not driving the solution. They have to be literally in the driver's seat, making sure that all these different people are doing the correct task that is most suited to their personality, based on their understanding of their relationship with their younger siblings. Guys, seriously, this is one of the best formulas when it comes to helping organize, coordinate, lead a club or event. You can say, person A, I knew their strength was X. That's why I gave them this task. Person Y, I knew their forte was something else, which is why I made sure that they were responsible for this. Now, when I saw X person struggling, here's how I stepped in and I changed things so that things would run a little bit smoother. These are the kinds of small changes that would honestly improve this essay by 10–20%. The sun began to set, but it didn't take us long working together. However, we definitely did get bitten by the enemy of summer, mosquitoes, quite a bit. I stood back, dusting off my hands, and looked back with satisfaction at our new and improved Velociraptor castle. This is really working, and I just love these phrases. They give the story so much pop. I wish we had more of this kind of at the start of page 2. Like all of a sudden kind of that voice and humor disappeared, and that's where we need the voice and humor the most, in that second solution. The student did send 2 conclusions and they were a little bit confused as to how to approach the ending. It's honestly one of the hardest parts. So take a look and let me know which one you guys think is better. I'm also gonna offer an upgraded version. Here's option number 1. Throughout my life, I may not have led in the most orthodox ways. This may be only one of the many tales of my backyard velociraptors, but the grit of the early breakfasts and the unity of fighting for and building back our coop is the spirit and enthusiasm I hope to bring to the college community. I do like the future forward focus here, and if we want to make spirits and enthusiasm the main theme, then we really need to see more of that in this section, right? I think there's more spirit and enthusiasm when it comes to feeding the chickens as opposed to kind of leading the siblings. Helping the family, coordinating siblings is one of the best essay topics, and this story really has the potential to get to a 9 out of 9. However, we have to talk about how this student F, is imbuing spirit and enthusiasm into their leadership as they construct this Velociraptor castle. Let's take a look at option 2. My Velociraptors have taught me to never solely rely on myself in the face of chaos and challenge. I've already brung this lesson in many different aspects of my life in EMT training, where me and the ambulance team work together to save lives, in teaching, where I team up with my coworkers to instill wonder among the community about dinosaur poop. But I also hope to bring my synergy to the college community, where I'll work with others to accomplish big, meaningful things. So something a little bit weird about this conclusion. It feels very, very vague and not as enthusiastic as the opening. That's another mistake that you guys really want to avoid, which is if you start off really, really strong with a bang, you have to maintain that same level of enthusiasm, vibrance throughout the rest of the essay. Otherwise, the admission officer, the reader, is left with this feeling of kind of like, and then things are kind of like sliding downhill. We definitely don't want to give them that sort of reaction, right? In its current state, I'd give this essay somewhere around a 6.5 to a 7. It definitely has so much flavor and personality. I'm getting multiple emotional reactions. However, there's big problems with the problem-solution ratio. Just give me 1 second and I'll highlight what is problem and what is solution in this essay. Ready? All right, guys, I finished highlighting what is problem and what is solution. But the problem with the solution is that it's not insightful enough yet. We don't really see a lot of initiative and proactivity. The essay is also missing a little bit of creativity. So let me break this down and explain, because this is super duper key and you guys can definitely apply all these lessons in your own essay too. As we discussed, the first solution is essentially it's cold and I'm feeding the chickens. The author, the student, mentions that this is an example of grit, but I'm not super entirely convinced. If they said that they've been doing this for 1,000 days straight and they've never missed one, yeah, that's a different story. If the student says that, okay, most people when they feed their chickens, they feed them X, they feed them junk. Not true about my chickens. They have the best chicken diet in the entire state of wherever this student is from. Another example is if this student said, actually, I've researched chicken diet and how it's tied to their health, or maybe it makes the chickens taste better. So I give them just premium, the very, very best, none of that kibble garbage. I am literally cooking for my chickens. I give them the best of the best. That would be a lot more creative and show kind of this above and beyond mentality. Moving on to the raccoon section. If we zoom out, long story short, this student is kind of attacking the raccoons with these weapons. Honestly, still not super above and beyond as well, and it's kind of tricky to kind of rewrite this section since it's already happened, it's in the past, but we could just infuse way more humor. Maybe they try to bribe the raccoons and that doesn't work. Or maybe they attack the raccoon first and then the raccoon fights back surprisingly, and they have to react and do something else. But right now, this section just felt a little flat, and I'm not even entirely convinced that we need it. We could get rid of this completely and just expand the third section over here, where it talks about the Snow White dwarves. There's something flat about this as well. It kind of feels repetitive, where it's like, Z, go get those zip ties from Dad's desk. Z returned with the zip ties. If I'm being brutally honest, it also feels like the dialogue is kind of hurting the story. In this case, generally speaking, you guys should really avoid dialogue unless there's an incredibly unique reason and we're trying to preserve voice, or it's someone else saying something as opposed to you saying something. Guys, this is about to be one of the craziest parts of the video, but check out how I upgraded this section. Let me know what you think. All right, so here's the old version, and then here's the new one. We weren't just fumbling around the backyard. No, sir. I turned us into a miniature task force, my own 7 dwarves, each with unique responsibilities. Daniil was and always has been my second in command. Steady, precise, happiest when left to work without interference. That's why I stationed him at the fence, where the zip tie snapped into place with mechanical rhythm. Knowing Anton was the strongest of us all, I directed him into the woods to haul back the biggest stones he could find, stacking them into a growing pyramid that would make ancient Egyptians jealous. Anya, the youngest, was determined to help too, even though her small frame made lifting impossible. So I gave her the most important task: inspecting every rock, brushing off dirt, and ensuring no stubborn ants or worms clung to them. Sensing she was nervous about bites, I slipped my own gloves onto her hands, whispering that they had secret magic powers. With each of us in motion, our velociraptor castle took shape, sibling beside sibling, stone beside stone. Wow. Now, obviously, if you're the student who submitted this, please don't copy paste this. That would be quite unethical. But hopefully this gives you an idea on how to take something from this to this. You feel me? Hope you enjoyed that first essay. Now let's take a look at essay number 2 by student G. Under the monotone beeps of the patient monitor, Mr. Ellis shared with me a painful revelation. He had recently been diagnosed with dementia. Curdled in his hospital bed, his voice quivered as he pondered the future. What is a human without his memories, he asked me. Honestly, I think this question is a much better hook. I would probably use this to start the essay. There's a few sentences and phrases we don't necessarily need either. That said, I really like curdled. We don't need to say painful revelation. I feel like we know if you're being diagnosed with dementia that that's a pretty painful revelation. So again, it's kind of removing that repetition. You could literally just say, Mr. Ellis shared he'd been diagnosed with dementia. I felt as if suddenly the weight of this discovery settled heavily on my shoulders. During the summer of 2024, I walked into Mount Sinai Hospital as a volunteer, eager to help patients in need. However, in that moment, I felt helpless. Naively, I thought offering him a cup of strawberry pudding from the food pantry would help take his mind off his grief. However, when this didn't work, I aimed to learn more about how dementia affects the brain. I began searching the internet for any information I could find. I landed on studies such as the UK Biobank cohort study, which showed how social isolation can significantly increase the chances of dementia in all people. I wondered whether being confined to a bed could accelerate Mr. Ellis's cognitive decline. Perhaps he felt trapped in his diagnosis with no one to consult. Again, I think there's just too much context here, so I'm gonna start trimming a few sentences and phrases so that we can focus more on the solution. This is actually a place where we want to slow down and expand upon. I don't think it's enough to just be like, I searched online, I read a few things. Again, I mentioned this in the previous essay, I believe it was it was student B over here. They had a very, very similar section where they talked about intellectual curiosity, and jumping from PubMed papers, you'll see like it's very common, this kind of first solution where you go online, you do a bit of initial research, but it's a lot more powerful already to mention particular scientific terms or to say, oh, this paper was from a Yale professor, or this paper was published in Nature. Here was the name of the title of the paper, and here's what I took away from it. I was shocked to discover A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right now, this revelation that, oh, social decline can accelerate dementia, it's not a really enlightening claim. But that being said, I like that this student doesn't want to leave Mr. Ellis alone. I do really like that it sounds like the setup for a second, even more impactful solution. All right, so take a look at some of the light line edits that I'm kind of suggesting over here. Instead of just saying something like, I felt helpless, it's a lot more powerful to reframe this as, hey, this is the reason why I started diving into my first solution, right? So determined to fight our shared helplessness. I didn't want to just sit around and do nothing. So I began scouring the internet. I read studies. It would be really, really good to include 2 or even 3 studies. And then I just kind of reframed this as a question. Instead of, I wondered whether being confined, I said, could being confined to a bed accelerate Mr. Ellis's cognitive decline? The thought of him feeling trapped in his diagnosis with no one to consult literally kept me awake at night. And all of a sudden, boom, we're hit with so much kind of like selflessness and empathy from this student. Beyond the biology of dementia, I learned about its devastating emotional toll on families. While reading anecdotes from caregivers, I saw how patients often grieve memories they cannot recall. How many moments in my life had I failed to preserve and cherish? Hearing these anecdotes made me reflect on my own role as a volunteer. I didn't want to be another person who wished they'd done more, asked more, and listened more. Again, I really like how the kind of absorption of this knowledge is driving the student, the main character, to do something. And now my question is like, okay, what exactly is he doing? We get this kind of turning point moment, and I want to see evidence of how this student does more, asks more, listens more. I want to see evidence of how he accompanies Mr. Ellis and makes him really feel the opposite of alone, right? Like totally heard and loved and seen. That's literally the answer to getting into your dream school. Determined to help capture, I think this is Mr. Ellis's fleeting memories, I offered to host a mock interview. What was your first job? I think we can delete this. What holidays or traditions did you cherish most growing up, and what'd you like to do in your free time? Armed with just my phone's voice recorder and a sheet of paper with questions, I sat with him in the quiet hours of the afternoon. He spoke about everything, From the time he got his heart broken in the back of his 91 Chevy to the way his grandma's chili used to smell after coming home from soccer practice in high school. Definitely one of the best parts of the essay. Very, very kind of human. I honestly got some chills reading this. It's a very different kind of solution and essay from the one we just read, but this is incredibly tender, heartwarming. This will work. I'm not sure we really need this kind of sentence either. We can just cut it. After he told me that his son would visit him in the hospital the next day, I felt a new sense of urgency. I worked past midnight to edit the 3-hour recording, cutting long pauses and organizing the clips by theme. Love, a 20-minute love letter to how he met his wife at his favorite golf center. Regrets, his rant about how he really wanted to travel to Italy. Childhood, a nostalgic vignette about how he used to hang Christmas ornaments with his grandma. Actually, this is an incredibly powerful solution. I love kind of the perseverance. I love the initiative here. I love how, there's like stakes and there's a sense of urgency. All that is just, in general, awesome storytelling. Well done. The next morning, I sent him to his son Daniel with a simple email. Your father, in his own words. Damn, I'm getting choked up. The tender moments of intimacy and gratitude that followed shaped the way I thought about what it means to serve. I used to be an ardent believer in the law of diminishing returns, that the more you gave, the less impact each additional effort made. But sitting beside Mr. Ellis, listening and recording, I saw the opposite. Watching him gradually open up with each new question asked and memory preserved, I realized it's often the smallest and most unexpected acts that have the most impact. Whether it be through taking a moment to accompany a patient during their lunch, or even creating a new training regimen for the badminton team, I strive to be present and build meaningful connections. Wow, that was an incredible ending. Whereas the first essay started off with just an explosion of bang and then kind of got a little bit weaker, this story started off pretty weak and then ended with an absolute bang. So good. At any rate, there's still some tweaks that could be done to improve this a bit more. Saying like, I want to be present, build meaningful connections, that's still a bit obvious. And I'm not a big fan of these two examples too. I think that this could be stronger. We really want to make sure that we end super strong. I honestly feel like we could end with this sentence over here about opening up. I wouldn't say it's the smallest acts that have the biggest impact. Sometimes it is the biggest acts that have the biggest impacts, but we can say perhaps, in the face of the impossible, right? In the face of like, literally you're losing your memory, then any act can have great impact. What really matters is just kind of this refusal to sit and rot and saying like, I will never do that. I will never watch someone be helpless, do nothing. That could also be very, very impactful too. I'm gonna pull up our rubric again, and if I had to rate this essay, I think it's also a 6.5, 7. The emotional reaction was quite visceral, and I think there's less issues with the problem solution ratio. So I think this essay, to be quite honest, is closer to a 7 than the other essay. I'd give this essay maybe a solid 7. And the other essay, the chicken velociraptor one, in my opinion, was closer to a 6.5. We also have a bunch of examples over here. This essay is essentially a double problem solution essay, and what's really interesting is to study other students who have a very similar case and story. This student F here in our elevated example Common App essays also volunteered at a hospital, and if we take a look at this ending, it's very similar. And honestly, I would encourage you guys to steal like an artist. If you're struggling to come up with a great conclusion, use this technique right here. I'm about to knock your socks off. Notice how both of these essays follow a very simple, incredibly powerful formula. I used to believe X, today I believe Y. And then super simple, super effective, there's kind of a zooming out moment where they talk about helping other groups and looking into the future, right? Like how they're going to contribute to college and beyond. You don't need to overcomplicate the solution. Once you have these kind of 2 or 3 building blocks, it becomes a lot easier. But the thing I really wanted to show you guys is to essentially reduce this to a formula, to a recipe, right? So you can literally do this. For the first X years of my life, I did X, right? I thought this. And then you put in the blank. My blank was blank, right? And then you can just kind of fill this in, proof of my XYZ. And so essentially we're working backwards. It's like, okay, I've eaten this amazing sandwich, but let me think about it. What is a sandwich? Yes, it's 2 pieces of bread, it's some meat, it has flavored vegetables, something like that. And now all of a sudden you're left with a formula and you can fill in the blank like a Mad Lib. So you can just say, but doing X has radically changed my perspective on whatever. In the last X number of years, I've learned that, and then you can you could put like, oh, I've learned that medicine can X, medicine can Y. I've learned that listening can do this. Listening can da 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 da. Repetition, when used intentionally, can be a very powerful rhetorical device. Being a volunteer has taught me what it takes to heal, what it means to give, what it means to live. And so this student could do the same thing. Watching him open up has taught me what it means to blank, what it means to blank, what it means to blank. And this isn't plagiarism or anything like that. It's just kind of like borrowing successful structures, in this case, sentence structures, to make the conclusion a bit more rhetorical, persuasive, that sort of thing. Just like how we have formulas for the big picture, we have a 3-scene montage essay, we have the double problem solution essay, we have the motif essay. You guys can also essentially reduce really great sentences down to their bones and then recreate them, right? This is one of the biggest hacks when it comes to any kind of storytelling or content or writing in general. Like when I'm making YouTube videos, guys, I'm studying successful hooks from other channels, from other brands, and then seeing how I can kind of morph and transform them and then flip them and make them my own. Yeah. The one thing that both of these essays are still kind of missing is that it really does focus on one interaction and one character. I wish this student G mentioned that Mr. Ellis wasn't just a one-off case and that he did this again and again and again. He created a podcast. You know, this was just one patient out of dozens. Or if student F with the velociraptors and the chickens mentioned that this wasn't the first time they fought raccoons, this wasn't the first time that they got all their siblings together, gathered them like hardworking dwarves and pushed them towards, you know, a common ground, built a collective solution. This was just one example of 5 or 10. Then they can say, by the way, I also do this in my other activities. That kind of narrative arc is incredibly powerful, and this way you're able to prove that it's not just about one singular event or moment, like 30 minutes of your life. That's the secret sauce. Harvard, Yale, I'll take my admissions letter now, thanks. If you want your essay featured on the channel, edited by yours truly, send it to this email here. And if you just want your essay professionally edited to ensure that it gets super high quality, in-depth analysis like so, then send it to our website, elevated.school/edit-my-essay. In total, our team has edited more than 10,000 essays, and I promise you it will be the best feedback of your life or money back guaranteed. Which essay did you guys enjoy more and why? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, take it easy guys. Peace.